Hello everybody, my name is Randy Ruby. I am currently a healthcare specialist for the United States Army. It's a pleasure to be talking to you all today. Currently we're going to be talking about solidarity amongst men. And you're wondering, why is a medic talking about solidarity amongst men? My apologies. And the reason why we're going to be talking about this is because as a medic, my job is to make sure that all of the needs of the patient are addressed. That's your spiritual, physical, and mental needs. Now you're asking, what does this have to play into anything about solidarity? The thing about being a medic is, my job is to make sure you're taken care of. Race, color, religion, skin, none of that matters. The fact of the matter is you. And by doing that means that I'm doing my job, and that means we can create a better future together. And lately this has become an increasing topic, and there's been a very huge historical figure whose speech is becoming more near and dear to my heart, and that is Dr. Martin Luther King. Listening to a lot of his speeches has reminded me that as a human, we all have a greater purpose, and that's to love each other. And I'm going to play a quick little skit from Dr. King, and I want you to listen closely to his words and take heed to what he has to say. This is one of the last speeches that Dr. King has given.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Now, Dr. King, this is a man who spoke volumes, way ahead of his time, and very passionate about making sure that humans had equal rights, such as every human should be doing. But when man, above all, stood out to make sure that everybody was being equally represented. And with this, the greatest thing he fought for was our First Amendment. Go ahead. There we go. There we go. So Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. Dr. King himself was fighting day in and day out to make sure that everybody was equally represented. And he knew at the end of the day that fight came with many consequences. That fight could potentially cost him his life. And unfortunately, it did cost him his life. And the message that was left afterwards still speaks to this day. The message that he has still carries on in our hearts to this day. Now, when we move forward, we're looking at things that have transpired after Dr. King's time. And doing some research, I went to the Washington Post, and since 1966 to December 10th of 2019, there have been a total of 172 mass shootings. Now you're looking at me and thinking 172 mass shootings, this doesn't really add up. There's been way more deaths than what this total count supposedly you've given us says. Now when I'm referring to 172 mass shootings, I'm referring to senseless shootings. Things that may or may not have been able to be prevented. Of these 172 shootings, there have been 1,228 people killed during these instances. Now, a lot of these things could have been prevented. Like I said, there could have been other things that could have transpired that caused these things. But when we look at the events that have happened, it caused a ripple of senseless pain, hatred, and misery for people that really shouldn't have happened. And at the end of the day, we put a name to this. We call this as going postal for these senseless shootings. And really, you hear about it joked a lot when really it shouldn't be joked about. The thing with this is we have to ask ourselves these big questions at the end of the day. Why does this keep happening? How do we stop this cycle? Every day, every action we take causes a ripple in time. That ripple that we cause could affect anything in the future. It could affect the way another human's thinking. It could affect somebody's home situation. You never know what those things could be. And going into that topic, we look at these shootings and we try and delve further in. The Washington Post did a very good job at going through and tabloiding everything from 1966 to current. And they equate in there as to how everything happened, but there's not the full dive as to why did it happen. What was the scenarios that caused these things? Was it finances? Was it marital issues? Was it complications at the workplace that could have been prevented? Did somebody have anger management that was left untreated? Was there undiagnosed PTSD? We don't know because at the end of the day, the deed's already been done and that person's already gone along with several of our loved ones that should still be here. Now moving to the future, we're going to ask ourselves a lot of things. The biggest thing I want to ask you is, when was the last time that you stopped to take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, what are you doing to not only benefit your community, but the neighborhood or the country as a whole? There's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of organizations within our communities we can take into. My question is, what are we going to do to be able to unite ourselves, to come together? As a medic, I don't have all the answers. As a medic, I can tell you I still have a long way to go before I can even come close to dealing with a lot of the national problems that we have. And even then, I know I'm not enough because as an individual, we're nothing. But as an organization, as being just a father, a brother, a sister, a loved one to a neighbor, we can do so much more united. So my question is, how are we going to come together to be able to stop this? At this time, I'm going to open up the questions. Anybody that has any questions who would like to partake into this, feel free to ask, because we need to open this topic.
Yes, and in your experience, when interacting with any of your patients, have you come across any early warning signs that someone is having personal trouble that may lead to incidents, or are there any warning signs that you know of that you can look at, and perhaps that we could look at in our own lives and our own loved ones and people we interact with?
That is actually a really excellent question, As a healthcare professional, there have been a few instances that I've come across. Granted, obviously, I can't say patient's name for confidentiality, but there's been times where I found severe anxiety that was left undiagnosed. There's even been a handful of patients I've come across that never even asked questions about their own personal life, like, what is your home like? Are you okay? Have you ever been in a scenario where you feel like you just can't control things? And I've had many patients come out to me and say, yes, I need help. And that's my job. You need help? Okay, I got you. That's all there is to it. And there's also been a few times where people have gone undiagnosed with things. And at that instance, we've been able to narrow down scenarios as to why these things could have been happening. So as a healthcare professional, that's truly an excellent question, because there are many factors that come down into patient care that truly are ignored or just not talked about.
So my question is, what would you recommend to someone who's maybe grown up with some preconceived notions about certain demographics, certain religions, certain races, and what would you say to them to kind of help change their mindset about what they grew up thinking?
To me personally, the best thing would be exposure, because people are often going to be unwilling to accept something that they've never physically experienced. And that's where the ripples of hate begin, because we do not physically, or we are physically not born with hate. That is something that's learned, that's a characteristic that's forced upon us through time. For me personally, I feel that if there is a scenario where you do have that, exposure is the best thing. As being a military personnel, the greatest thing that I've found, especially in my basic training, was we had a large group of people that absolutely hated each other at the beginning. We all sat down, we got out our differences, we beat each other up a few times, but that's what brothers do. You always have that friendly bonding. And the only way to really get that is just sitting down, hashing it out, and finding out, well, what's your notion and what's really this? Because we all see one side of the story, but we never get the other side. So to be able to flip that coin, we both have to be willing to do what we need to do to join hands and just come together. Any other questions? All right. So at this time, before I close out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to post up the links that I use for the video, but also for the Washington Post information. If you have any curiosity as to visiting any of this, feel free to visit these sites. They are excellent sources of information, and you can find out a lot of history about these incidents that have happened. At the end of the day, do what you can to stop the senselessness. That's all I can ask you. Let's join together.